All right, let's get right into it. We're going to break down a film that didn't just define a moment in time, it feels like it actually predicted our future. Of course, we are talking about The Matrix.
And that really brings us to the central question here, one that honestly feels more relevant with every passing day. When you watch The Matrix now, does it really feel like science fiction? Or does it feel a little too much like a documentary? Yeah, if you've had that thought, you are definitely not alone. I mean, look at this, the feeling that it's wild how it feels less like sci-fi and more like a documentary of our lives now. So, how on earth did a sci-fi action movie from 1999 become what feels like a prophecy? Well, let's break it down.
So, the movie's incredible staying power isn't just about the cool bullet time and the iconic black leather. Let's be real. It's about how it tapped into this deep, growing anxiety about the world. An anxiety that has only gotten way more intense since 1999.
And this is the most important part. This was not an accident. The Wachowskis were like these brilliant cultural DJs, pulling from all these different underground ideas that were just bubbling under the surface. They grabbed from dystopian fiction, from philosophy, from music, even from anime, and they mixed it all together into a perfect cultural storm. So let's break down that recipe. What were the specific cultural ingredients that made The Matrix so potent and so weirdly prophetic?
Well, first up, you have to remember our whole vision of the future was changing. For decades, we were all promised this shiny, happy Jetsons-style future with flying cars and robot maids. But that was starting to look pretty rusty. Instead, we got the dark, gritty, corporate-run future of movies like Blade Runner, where technology wasn't really our friend anymore. It was starting to feel like a threat.
And this whole new pessimistic vibe got a name, cyberpunk. This wasn't sci-fi about distant galaxies. It was about the very near future. The core idea was simple, but really unsettling. High-tech, low-life. Just think about that. Incredible, amazing technology, but a society that is completely falling apart.
Now this is where it gets really wild. The absolute rulebook for cyberpunk was this novel, William Gibson's Neuromancer, from way back in 1984. He's the guy who came up with the term cyberspace for a shared virtual world that you could plug your brain into. And what did he call that shared illusion? He called it The Matrix. Yep, the name, the core concept, it was all sitting right there more than a decade before the film even came out.
At the exact same time, this other massive influence was just crashing into Western culture from Japan, anime. And it was completely shattering the idea that anime was just something for kids. Two films in particular were huge. First, you had Akira, which was just incredibly violent and thematically complex. And then you had Ghost in the Shell, which was pure cyberpunk. It was asking these really deep questions about what it even means to be human in a cybernetic world. And its visual style? Well, let's just say the Wachowskis were taking very, very detailed notes. And this whole mood wasn't just in fiction. You could hear it in the music, too. The entire vibe of the culture was shifting. You know, the 80s were all about that slick pop, the big hair, that polished showbiz sparkle. Then, in 1991, Nirvana kicks the door down. The 90s alternative scene was all about raw, authentic frustration, a giant middle finger to all the fake, manufactured culture that came before it.
But here's the paradox. At the very same time you have this explosion of authentic anger, you also get the explosion of boy bands and pop princesses. And these groups weren't about reality at all. They were products, perfectly engineered by record labels. You could almost call them a simulation of a band.
And believe it or not, there is a philosophical term for this. It's called hyperreality. A French philosopher named Jean Baudrillard came up with it. It's the point where the simulation, the copy, becomes so real and so pervasive that we can't tell the difference from the original anymore. And worse, we just stop caring which is which, maybe because the simulation feels safer and simpler than the messy reality it's replacing.
So you've got these big, abstract ideas swirling around. Dark futures, fake realities, hyperreality. But then a very real, very concrete technological threat popped up that took all this philosophical stuff and made it feel terrifyingly immediate. And that, of course, was the internet. I mean, it started as this military project called ARPANET, born out of Cold War paranoia. But then it goes public in 91, and the release of the Netscape browser in 93 was the real game changer. Suddenly, anyone could get online, and the growth was just insane.
This sudden, explosive dependence on a brand new technology that nobody really understood, well, it led directly to a massive worldwide panic at the end of the decade.
The Y2K bug.
The fear was that when the clock ticked over from 99 to 00, older computer systems just wouldn't know what to do and everything would just break.
People were worried about power grids, banks, global infrastructure. Would it all just stop? Now, the disaster never actually happened, but Y2K was a crucial moment. It was the first time we as a global society had to confront a terrifying new reality. Our entire world now runs on complex code that almost none of us really understand.
So, into this perfect storm of cyberpunk aesthetics, 90s disillusionment, and this very real technological anxiety stepped the Wachowskis. And the final piece of the puzzle wasn't just having all these ideas, it was how they brilliantly packaged them for everyone.
So they wrote this incredible but massive and complicated script. Studios loved it but refused to give that kind of budget to first-time directors. So what'd they do? They went out and directed a fantastic, low-budget thriller called Bound, just to prove they had the skills. And it worked. The success of that movie got The Matrix the green light.
But this was their true genius. They took all this niche, complex, underground stuff, cyberpunk, hyperreality, philosophy, and they wrapped it in a story that everyone already knows, the hero's journey. An ordinary person, Neo, discovers he's special and has the power to save the world. By using that familiar framework, they made these really difficult ideas exciting and accessible to absolutely everyone. And that right there is why we are still talking about this movie today. Because all those themes that seemed kind of abstract and philosophical back in 1999, well, they're not abstract anymore. They have become the reality we live in every single day.
And this is where it all comes together. And it's almost spooky. I mean, look at these parallels. In The Matrix, you had a simulated world to distract people. In our world, we have curated social media feeds we live through. In The Matrix, you had machine overlords. Today, we have a handful of giant tech companies controlling all of our information. The film showed humans as batteries. For us, our personal data is the product that powers their system. And rogue, unpredictable AI agents? Yeah, that stopped being science fiction a while ago, didn't it? You see, the film wasn't just a fantasy. It was a mirror. It took all those cultural anxieties and wove them into a single story that felt true then and feels even more true now. Which brings us to the final unsettling question. The movie gave us a choice, the red pill or the blue pill. Looking at the world we've built, you have to wonder, have we already chosen?